Hey there, welcome to this week's episode. So glad you're here with us as always. We have another fun interview this week, which I'm really excited to dive into with Dr. Ashley Dwyer, who is the founder of the Big Day Nutrition Coaching and a former pharmacist. After going through a slew of health issues due to lifestyle factors and stress, Ashley saw firsthand just how our current medical system was flawed. After 3 PCPs, 2 endocrinologists, and 3 functional medicine practitioners, she finally got the help she needed. Ashley decided to shift her life's work in the direction, focusing on holistic health coaching instead of handing out Band-Aids behind a counter. Ashley and her team specialize in holistic nutrition, macro tracking, metabolic restoration, individualized fitness plans, accountability, and community, helping women between the ages of 25 and 50 eat more and reach their health goals. You can find her at thebigdaynutrition.com. Welcome, Ashley.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited that you're here. I love stories of, let's say, allopathic practitioners moving into holistic functional medicine. So first, I want to know, A, how you decided to become a pharmacist, and then B, why did you decide to move away from that?
So I always like to point out, like, you choose your medical path when you're graduating high school, because then you have to like immediately jump into the pre-med, pre-pharm.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go that track. And at 18 years old, I look back at that now and I'm like, how are we allowed to decide to choose what we want to do?
Really?
At that young. But at the time I was like a really big math and science nerd. Like, I'm the person who loved math in school, which you don't really find that a lot, but I liked helping people too. So I was like, perfect, I'm going to be a doctor. And then you look into what it takes to be a doctor and you're like, okay, I won't actually become one until I'm 31.
Right. I was going to say 10 years down the road. Yeah.
I'll be on call, whatever. Yeah. It was horrible. So at the time, pharmacists were super in demand and it was like a good career. You're paid decently, not like a doctor. I thought I could have a family life with it. And so I chose to go that route because I wasn't on call per se, right? Like I had the flexibility of what I thought was the best of both worlds. And then you get into the career and it's totally different depending on what route you took.
Of course.
So I chose retail pharmacy because I was like, I like people.
And then you stop liking people by the end, huh?
I mean, it's horrible to say that, but like you end up like working with the public is very hard. If anyone's worked in retail, it's a struggle sometimes.
And I've heard it's been even worse, like with COVID and everything, right?
So
like being a pharmacist.
Yeah. Yeah. So I worked for like big box chains like Walgreens. And then if you're on the East Coast or Southeast Coast, I worked for Publix, which was better, but it just wasn't set up for success in the way you can help people, the metrics that you had to meet. I still loved working with people and getting an actual chance to help, but because of the way everything was set up, it was not like you weren't able to.
Right.
So, I fell in love with like nutrition and fitness in pharmacy school, and I wasn't going to quit because I had already invested money into half my year.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll just use it to help my patients. And then you realize you don't really get to help your patients. Right. So it was like, what am I doing? And truthfully, I would hear stories of people switching over and I'd be like, you could never do that. How do people even do that? How do you do that? And then I realized you just do it. Like it's a decision.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it fascinating, right, that pharmacists actually do get a decent amount of nutrition training versus doctors. No, you don't. Oh, that's a lie.
So actually, even doctors, I will argue, obviously in pharmacy school, we learn a lot about the body, the pathophysiology of things, how drugs work in the body, receptors, all of that stuff. We learn counseling points on diet and exercise and like the DASH diet for high blood pressure and diabetic diets per se, but you're never actually taught about the metabolism in depth. You're never actually taught about weight loss efforts. It's just like exercise, 3 times a week and eat a lot of fresh whole foods. And you're like, that's great. But again, the practicality of it when you're teaching someone, isn't where it's at. And of course, you know, when you're counseling, when we're doing these counseling moments, you're like, well, diet and exercise is first, but nobody really wants to hear that. They prescribe, they over prescribe. And that's what was kind of happening as I'm handing out Band-Aids behind the counter for prescriptions. And then I encountered it myself, like what you read, my own health issues. And I was that person who was getting prescribed all the things. And I was like, no, all I needed was some massive lifestyle transitions and it would have been fine.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about that, I, say this all the time, I used to get more angry, I guess, with doctors because it was like, well, they prescribe medication and do surgery. Right. And in, the past few years, I tell my clients all the time when they get frustrated, I'm like, well, that's actually what they were taught. And that is what they're good at for situations of acute issues, right? Like, thank God that they're there. But in reality, they don't understand. We're never taught sort of these underlying connections and things that need to be done because, like, as simple as like nutrients actually make up our tissues, our bones, our organs, all of those things, and that disconnect is so prevalent because they were never taught that. And so that's why I'm like, don't go to a doctor for chronic issues. You're not going to get the answer there.
So I love what you're saying, because obviously I'm not here to totally put down Western medicine or allopathic medicine. It 100% has its place. But where the disconnect is you come in with symptoms, they give you treatment for those symptoms, and we never really get to the core issue, which is where you see that in more holistic functional medicine. And so then you're on medication, and then you're prescribed more medication for the side effects of this medication. And then you just feel awful. Nothing's really, like, you are surviving longer, but you're so unhealthy on the inside, and you're relying off of so many drugs for these certain things. And it just, the antibiotics are a different thing. The overprescribing of antibiotics is slowly killing our gut health, one prescription at a time.
Absolutely. And people go in asking for antibiotics, and I'm like, it's half the time it's not even a bacterial issue, much less other things that you can use, in the interim, so that if you actually do have a situation like sepsis where you really do need antibiotics, like, great, use them in that situation,
Yeah. And I think the problem is, though, is like you said, doctors are taught more about disease states than, say, pharmacists are. And then they have in their training, like, lists of preferred medications that are first line, second line that you prescribe. And so if a doctor any practitioner hasn't done extra training in nutrition, functional medicine, anything like that, you don't know what you don't know. So they're just, it's almost not even their fault. It's the way the system is set up.
Right. Absolutely. And actually, going back to what you were saying about, like, the sort of living longer, I'm reading this book right now, Younger You, from Dr. Kara Fitzgerald. Nice. And she talks in it about, there's some studies that show the last, I believe, 16 years of our lives are, in general, real bad, like surviving, like basically just surviving. And the goal is really, do you really want to live longer to just survive and feel horrible? No, I'd rather die earlier than have to sit there and not be able to do anything and be on a million drugs and all of that just keeping me alive. Right. Versus there's so much that we can do, obviously, to live longer, but actually feel better longer.
Exactly.
Too.
That's the third lane, right?
Exactly.
Choose between the two. There's a third path.
Yeah. And it's interesting because she has a graph of how it used to be, which was like, you're living. And then there's a quick downfall and you die. That was much younger. Now we're living, but it's a slow decline. Right. Yeah. And it's like, yes, there is that third option. Like, we can do this and have that, I'd much rather have a quick decline and just go at the end, but have had a good life up until then. So what did you end up doing to sort of move from being a pharmacist to the work that you're doing now?
So I, like we kind of mentioned, I went through a lot of doctors and situations myself that kind of opened me up to what was missing and in the healthcare system. And what kind of happened to me, just to like get into a little, it's not like I had dire issues.
I was like, tell us your story.
It's not super crazy, but the way that I felt was really nuts. And all of my lab work was just insane. So I was young. I was like 26, 27. And I was working and feeling like absolute crap. I'm just like, there's no sugarcoating it. I would have coffee and then immediately still feel like narcoleptic. Like I was falling asleep almost at my pharmacy job. Like it was insane. So I finally went in for blood work, and, I noticed like hair shedding. I noticed a bunch of things were off and weren't going well. So I went in for blood work, and literally everything from like my hormones being perimenopausal at 26, my thyroid was crazy. My insulin was insane. My glucose, I think my fasting glucose, for those who don't know, like normal is anywhere between like 75 and 90 healthy wise. I was like under 70, like it was low. For
some
fasting.
hypoglycemia.
So my cortisol was super high. So every metabolic marker was just out of control, either up or down in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so their answers to me at the time were not like, what does your lifestyle look like? What are you doing? It's, let's start you on thyroid meds immediately. And, we did get off of birth control, which I do agree with. Got off of birth control because I'd been on it for probably 13 years, 12, I don't know, something like that at the time. And like, then it just became a guessing game of what my dose needed to be. Then I was hyperthyroid. And then I was just like, when you're feeling like crap and your metabolism is essentially not working because your thyroid and your adrenals are so burnt out, it feels like a day feels like a week. Like it was just like, what am I doing for answers? And then I finally started going more towards the functional route. And it was like, okay, well, you're training like 6 or 7 days a week. You're not really taking rest days. What's your sleep like? You're not eating any carbs. Like, where is your carbohydrate intake coming from? You're eating 1,300 calories a day. And I was like, this is not normal. What do you mean?
Yeah.
So I kind of fell in love with that process, and then started doing those lifestyle changes for myself. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's such a better way. And unfortunately, once you start medication for your thyroid, it's very hard to get off.
Yes.
And so I've found a medication I like. I'm slowly still working on decreasing the dose, which is working. But I might be on it forever. It's still something that we deal with, but I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to prevent women from doing the same thing that I had to go through, because I still have PTSD to this day of like the hair shed that comes along with that.
Oh, that is the number one thing that women come to me with, freaking out, right? Just freaking out.
Traumatizing. Yeah. And then the stress doesn't help. You're like, don't stress about it. It'll make it worse. And you're like,
how? You're like, that's a good story. Yeah. You're like, it's coming out in clumps. Can I ask, did they put you on Synthroid originally? Is that what you were on?
They did. And I did, like, being a pharmacist, I was just like, levothyroxine, whatever. And then we did the T3 also, or like the levothyronine. And then I finally, like, I went into my doctor and I'm like, put me on Armour. I want to be on Armour. Or NP, the generic. And that was like the game changer.
Yeah. And I ask that because so many of my clients and people listening do have thyroid issues. And I always point out to, you want to get a full thyroid panel, right? Often doctors will just run TSH. If you're lucky, they'll do free T4, right? And we want to see what the free T3 is doing. And we want to know for sure the antibodies, which
nailed it.
And so I just always, whenever there's an opportunity to bring that up on here, I do, because I try to get that in people's heads, that you need to really know the full spectrum of what's happening with your thyroid, because it is such an intricate part of the system, right?
And if they have a resource like you, like if they're listening, even if I offer it right now on this podcast, if you get your free T3 or everything tested and your doctor's like, it's normal, but you want to double check, like send me them. I'll really quickly tell you in the DMs if it's normal or not. Because you could be on the low end and it be normal, but still symptomatic. So.
Right. Especially that free T3, right? I mean, it's definitely I tell people all the time, the functional ranges look a lot different than the reference ranges that they have on there. But it is fascinating because the majority of the time they'll just give you Synthroid, right? And women do not, for the most part, tend, feel better on that. And that need for the full spectrum that you get from something like Armour, but definitely that conversion, that T4 to T3 conversions where a lot of the issues stem for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't need medication, I would say that route first, because just not to like dive into specifics, but my TSH was normal. My free T3 or free T4 was a little low, and my T3 was low because I wasn't eating anything. Like had I bumped that up, it probably would have normalized if I would have lowered my cortisol and just balanced everything out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Well,
digress.
and I know, right. And this is, I think, such an important point I was going to get into later, but might as well ask you now. Do you feel like women eat enough in general? Yeah. So can we talk about that and why we need to be eating more?
I was going to say, if this is a video podcast, I literally just mouthed no.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I didn't say it out loud.
You could be like, hell no.
For the audio listeners.
Yeah.
No, women do not eat enough at all. And in fact, when I started my company, it's funny, I forgot to change, I guess, some of the verbiage, but we used to be the Big Day Nutrition. And then, because I only used to work with brides and grooms, because that's how I kind of got started.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's transitioned over the years.
Yeah.
Now we have morphed into like Team BDN coaching, because we used to just call each other Team BDN anyway.
Gotcha.
And so now that has a different methodology to it. And now we've morphed into helping women, especially with metabolic restoration, because so many clients were coming to us eating 1,000 to 1,200 calories. And they're like, I can't lose weight. I'm doing everything. I have PCOS. I have hypothyroid. I have this. Like, what is going on? What can we do? And I'm like, you need to eat.
Yeah.
We need to eat.
Yeah.
And of course that's terrifying to hear, but we take everyone through reverse diets and all of that to help get that back in order. But no, mostly women are never eating enough, because it's always like eat more and exercise less.
Yeah.
It's never taught.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love I don't know if I've heard metabolic restoration before. I love that term, because it is so much that women have been culturally put through, I mean, within their families' diets, culturally diets, always told their body's not okay as it is. And so it's this constant thing that majority of women are dealing with of, feeling like they need to be eating less than they do. And then obviously how they eat too, right? I mean, there's such a thing for sort of that small or no breakfast and drink coffee,
so
right?
Many people skip breakfast.
Yeah. And then dinner is this like huge thing, because you've barely eaten all day and you're just like going to town, and often later than it needs to be, et cetera, and so it's like we have to flip the script on that.
100%. And you know what, the metabolic restoration, it got to a point where, like I said, so many women were coming, and that's what we were kind of like unintentionally specializing in. So I ended up creating this terminology called the ABCs of metabolic restoration. And so clients would fit into categories A, B, or C, depending on the severity of the situation, their adaptation, and what they were doing. And obviously C is like the most severe. A was just like simple adaptation, like your metabolism has come down from years of undereating. And the issue, some of the stories I've just heard, it makes me like, because we don't obviously get to work with everyone. There are some issues or financial situations that come up. But I had one woman who lived off of, I think, 2 protein shakes and blueberries all day. And I was like, how? She had 6 kids. I was like, how do you have energy?
Yeah, at all. Yeah.
How are you? No.
Yeah.
And it's just this, it makes me so bad. Like, I'm so passionate about just like, no, let me help you. I promise. I promise there's a better way.
So what are some of the ways that you start off with when women first come to you?
So before we even begin with like a plan, we have everyone do a 3-day log, sometimes more, depending on what's going on, of what they're already eating and drinking. Because I want to see what your day looks like before we even start. Because I can't get you to where you need to be if I don't know where you are, right?
100%.
So we'll do a consult call. We'll see where they're at. We'll see where their stress levels are at, their sleep, what their current training regimen looks like, and then what their food looks like, the choices they're making, the calories they're eating. And then I'll look at the macros, or my team will look at the macros. And then we start them real simple with just like not a meal plan, but kind of a recommended meal plan, because we don't really give meal plans. We can't,
Right.
not being a nutritionist. So we'll get them more on a let's eat some more veggies type of thing. We'll get them eating 3 meals and 2 snacks a day if they're not really eating. We'll start slow, and then we'll go into macros.
Yeah.
And get them reverse dieting if they need to.
Nice. And can you, because I know this is such a big thing that I get asked all the time, because it's so popular right now, like intermittent fasting. And particularly, the sort of, I guess, most common one, which is what, the 16-8 hour, and women definitely like want to hop on that. Right. And in a lot of ways, some women are already doing that because they're eating
intentionally.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, exactly. So what do you say when women bring that up to you?
So I know, like, I want to be very generalistic and be like, intermittent fasting has its place, right? But I'm going to instead be very opinionated.
Yeah, go for it. I like it.
Intermittent fasting was designed for like digestive health, autophagy, longevity, things of that nature. It's really only studied in males. Yep. So a lot of these diets are only studied in males, right? Yep. So when women want to pick up the same thing, it gained its popularity because it just shortened your window of eating, which means caloric deficit, right?
Exactly.
That's why it works.
Yeah.
However, when you're already eating too little and then you shorten that window even more, A, that's going to be a big problem for your metabolism and your stress levels. And B, that fasting component is actually driving up cortisol and making everything else worse in your body. So you end up being hungrier, binging. Sometimes you'll even lose your hunger cues because of what's going on and just being in chronic dieting. Because so when people are like, well, I'm just not hungry in the morning, or I just don't get hungry anymore, I'm like, that's a bad sign. Like, that's a red flag to me, is when we don't have hunger cues anymore. And they're like, but that's just how I've always been. I'm like, it's not how it's supposed to be though.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you said that. And part of why, bring it up, like, I think that if you're in menopause, it can be more useful for you because you have nice steady hormones, right? Yeah. Or you're sort of so far along in your process. I still don't think personally that 16-8 is good for any woman. No. But if you're further along in your health process where things are pretty stable, then you can talk about bringing it in more. But like you said, I actually see so many women really need that 5 meals a day, like 3 regular meals, 2 snacks, that kind of thing, because the blood sugar dysregulation is so huge, right? And that cortisol dysregulation is so huge. And it is really hard when you have every social media thing coming at you saying, intermittent fasting, like, and eat 2 meals a day. And it's just like, you don't have a period. Like, this is a problem. You're not eating enough to have a period.
And maybe people don't like realize why it's so bad. So just like scientifically speaking, like when your cortisol is elevated, it's going to downregulate thyroid. It's going to downregulate your sex hormones. So that's why you stop getting your period. That's why if you're in childbearing years and fertility is important to you, you may lose that if you are fasting and intermittent fasting. So if I have someone who's really, really wanting to fast, or it's not for religious reasons, it's just like, I want to, then I'll be like, okay, let's do, like, all you really need is maybe a 10-hour window, maybe at max, like a 12-hour window while you're sleeping, but do that. And then the one thing that I tell them not to do, which is going to be the hardest, right, is when you're intermittent fasting, you'll have black coffee, right, on an empty stomach, because it doesn't break your fast. Having coffee while fasting, while your cortisol is already high, and an empty stomach is just going to shoot your cortisol up even higher.
Thank you.
It's gonna be so bad.
I know. People are like, I feel so great when I have my first cup of coffee and don't eat for 3 hours. And I'm like, your poor adrenals.
It will catch up to you.
Absolutely.
It will catch up to you.
Absolutely.
Oh, man. And putting butter in it is not going to help.
No, absolutely. I know. Oh, there's so many things on that. But so, do there end up being a lot of sort of, pushback or mindset issues that come up around shifting this way of eating when these women come to you?
1,000%. And to be honest, it's really expected. I had the same pushback. I had to go through my own journey like that. And I have a former a history in competitive like bodybuilding type of sports when I was like 10 years ago was my first one. So it's been a while, but I was eating nothing. And so to learn now, like I have to take a diet break, like I have to eat more. What's that going to do to my body? No way.
Right.
And so I had to go through those same mental pushbacks. And the thing that helped me get over it is, even though I'm a health coach, I hired a health coach. Like I needed that accountability to just trust in someone for the process. And then it was okay, right? Like that's why I always say hire help or have someone there for guidance. But for that on our team, we are, 2 out of 3 of our coaches at the moment, we plan to get the third one done. We're certified in health mindset certification.
Oh, cool.
So we can kind of help with that a little bit. We also have a licensed clinical social worker on staff that does Zoom meetings twice a month for our clients to come in and ask questions and kind of like shift where, that deeper type of guidance that we can't provide because we're not certified.
Yep.
So she'll help in that aspect because we know it's not easy, but at the same time, at the same point, it may be your only option to get to the goals that you want to get to, is to take a little break, let your metabolism come back up, and then we can go back later.
Yeah. And I tell clients all the time, trauma is such a huge underlying issue when it comes to hormonal dysregulation, really any health issue. And obviously I can't help them in that, it's like, I can do some like nervous system calming, that kind of thing, but really working with a person that is trained to work on those trauma issues. And I even think of our diet culture in a lot of ways as inducing trauma, right? And like PTSD levels, especially for women that had to, whatever, when they were young, maybe their parents put them on a diet or sent them somewhere or what, there's all of this stuff connected to that. So working with somebody that can really help get to the root of that trauma and help process that is huge.
I love that you brought up trauma. We don't do a ton of work with underlying trauma, even though I so heavily believe in it too. It's kind of like the deeper process, right? I even have some of it myself, so I know what it is. But again, that's why we want that mental health counselor there to
100%.
like help with that component, because I don't never want to overstep. It
is absolutely. And I think that's really cool that you guys have that as part of your program, that you have the social worker there. It's amazing. So let's talk about the movement component, because as you stated in your own story, right, you were probably over exercising and under eating at the same time. So do you see that with a lot of women that come to you too?
So for the most part, I will say there are, like, I'm trying to go day by day because I take all the consult calls for a company, even though they may not work with me, I still onboard everyone pretty much because I like to hear the stories. I like to put them into the categories, right, if necessary. Like yesterday's calls, no, the women were very like, I want to exercise again. I haven't had time. I need to get back into healthy habits. And then I have the very, and I think it runs in themes. I have the very like type A professional boss women who kind of remind me of myself too. So we click instantly on the call and they're like, no, I'm not stressed, but I'm doing I have 3 kids. I'm exercising 6 times a day, doing HIIT in the morning with my F45, my boot camp or like Orange Theory. And I'm watching what I eat super clean. And I'm like, whew, let's take a deep breath. Let's come down a minute. Because even though you might not like feel stress, the way that we're operating is very stressful on our adrenals. And yes, they're trying to, when most people want to lose weight, they go to exercise first. And even though that has like the lowest ability to losing weight, right? Like that's a different topic. But getting active, I'll never steer someone away from exercise. It's always great for heart health and for longevity. But there needs to be rest days. And I used to be team no rest days, like fasted cardio queen. Like I used to be that person, and it was doing so much more harm than good because your recovery's probably crappy. You're not recovering.
Yep.
You're not sleeping well. You're not eating enough. And you're already high stress in your real life and in life in general. So all you're doing is overtaxing yourself.
Yep. Yep.
So with those clients, we kind of have to I have to barter with them.
You're like, all right, I'll give you this if you give me 2 days a week.
Like, listen, you can keep doing your HIIT for 5 days a week, which HIIT is another topic. And I've done podcast episodes on why not everyone should do HIIT and why it's not really a favorite, but I'll let you continue to do this or even CrossFit 4 to 5 days a week if you promise to eat this much and get in 8 hours of sleep per night. Right? Like, it's almost like you have to barter for a little bit.
I love that. And just what kind of stuck out to me of what you just said too was the foundations, right? Like, so much of our health, like I'd say 80 to 90% of our health comes back down to the foundations that most of us are not doing. Getting that, 8+ hours of sleep a night, getting enough food, and enough quality food in your diet each day, taking rest, taking rest days, and in your day, getting some kind of specific, parasympathetic nervous system, like rest, even if it's just 5 friggin' minutes, and what else are my foundations that I'm forgetting right at the moment?
I mean, hydration's a big one that we don't really talk about a lot.
Yes. Like, so many people are dehydrated and they don't realize.
Everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And then, drinking all that coffee and not getting enough minerals in their diet to help. Exactly. And it's like, when you dial those things in, and digestion, in my practice is a huge one. It's just like, because of the amount of antibiotics that we've had, birth control, et cetera, like the digestion's off. And so getting even the foundations of digestion back in is so key. Right. And then you can, and obviously movement too, but movement that works for your body. So I just want to point that out, because I think so many people, including myself, again and again, right? You hear about this new supplement that came out, or you hear about this new thing, way of eating. And it's like, you got to do the foundations first and foremost.
Yeah. It's like, is this the new magic pill? And then you're like, there's never a magic pill. There's never an easy button.
Nope. And we have to get that mentality.
Foundations. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Because if someone were to go to, like, a big one that people come from with us, or some of them, and I'm going to just say them out loud. It's fine. But like, if you were to do like V-Shred, or if you were to do Beachbody program, like if you were to do something that is like an all encompassing, like, challenge, or like lose this much weight in 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, they are not, their onboarding questions for you are going to be height, weight, like activity, how much do you want to lose, et cetera. And they're going to like cookie cutter print out you a program, right? They're not going to care how everything is functioning during the program or challenge. They're just going to want you to get results. And then you get those results after, and they're like, cool, that was really fun. Good luck on your way. Right? So they don't even,
next,
they crash your metabolism, and then you have no idea how to restore it or get it back. So whereas if someone were to go to you or me, I'm sure our intake questions are a lot more extensive. We want to know, like, health history. We want to know what you're already eating, what your digestion already looks like, everything. And then during the program, like every week with check-ins with our clients, we ask them about their bowel movements. We talk about poop every week.
Yes. I always think it's funny when a client like apologizes for telling me, and I'm like, I talk about poop every day, like literally every day. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you want to, like, I know results are the main goal for a lot. And especially if you're not comfortable with where you're at right now, or, where you want to be. But if we don't do it in a proper way, you're going to have to do it multiple times until you do it in the proper way.
Yep.
It's just going to continue to be a cycle.
Absolutely. And I tell, this happens a lot. I think when I talk to women, whether they're clients or elsewhere, like they're like, oh yeah, I did this thing, whatever it was, for 6 weeks, and it totally worked.
Bad diet here.
Right. Exactly. And they're like, it totally worked. But then like I gained the weight back, and I'm like, well, did it really work?
So then it didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. And it's tough, right? Because our psyche goes into like, oh, it connects, like I lost weight to that. And so they're like, if I can just do it again. And I find a lot of times women will try the same thing again and it doesn't work the same, in the same way. And it's like, right, because that first time busted your metabolism. So it's actually not going to work. And it put you on this, default. And so you have to understand that, like you're saying, looking at long-term health is changing these things slowly but surely. And you can't get there any faster than your body's ready to go and feel safe and secure in the process.
I 100% agree. And like, let's take keto, for example. Like a lot of women and people in general love to do keto, and you get fast results on it simply because you're literally cutting out an entire macronutrient.
Right.
And
like,
water weight,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like done.
Yeah.
But so you do keto and so you lose the weight quickly, but then I ask them, I'm like, can you give up carbs forever? And they'll be like, no.
Right.
And they're like, so why are we doing this? Like,
right.
What is the goal if it's not sustainable? Right.
Right.
And they're like,
Absolutely.
well, I want to lose a bunch of weight first and then I'll sustain it. And I'm like, okay, well, here's the problem with that logic. Yes, it's really cool to lose 30 pounds really quickly, but now what we're going to have to do to reestablish what you just did to your body is going to take us forever. Yeah. And you're probably going to gain some of that weight back because it wasn't sustainable, right?
Right.
So either way, you're not going to stay there. You're not going to stay. And that's kind of like the unlearning and relearning process that we have. You can probably agree, most of this is mental. It's 100% just mental shifts that we have to become comfortable with, or have clients become comfortable with, so that they can like lean into the process instead of, this goes against everything I've ever known in my life. Like, I don't trust it. Right.
Absolutely. And thinking about that, like going back to the exercise thing, I'm super curious what your thoughts are on HIIT, because that is another thing right now that's so, pushed out there as like the answer and the key that everybody should be doing.
So I think with, what becomes popular in mainstream society in general is, especially nowadays, is convenience and instant gratification. How quickly can we do something because we're busy? And how efficient can that process be so we can still get results in less amount of time, right? And like you said, that's probably the worst for our parasympathetic nervous system is to constantly be on the go and doing things like that. So what HIIT is great for is, yes, burning more calories in a short amount of time. However, when you are already pushed to the max, or you have a hormonal condition or blood sugar regulation issue, or, like thyroid, like myself, HIIT would be the worst thing that I could do for my body, because it will just throw me more into a hormonal cortisol spin, because HIIT will essentially raise your cortisol levels. And again, when most women are doing HIIT, they're also not eating enough. And they're also probably working out fasted if it's early in the morning too, which will both drive up cortisol anyway. So I always recommend, if you like HIIT, because it is good for cardiovascular health, is maybe 1 to 2 days a week. And then we focus on like lower impact exercises. But most times HIIT is super disguised now, and sometimes recommended for more than it needs to be. Like HIIT can be 20 minutes, and that's all I really want someone to do is 20 minutes.
100%. Yep.
But now you have like 60-minute grinding classes or 60-minute Peloton classes where you're going up and down and up. The Peloton is honestly a HIIT class.
Interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah.
Because you're doing the roads, you're sprinting, you're backing off, you're doing the mountains, you're coming back down. So it's kind of in its own way a HIIT exercise.
Right.
And a lot of people don't look at it. And Peloton became super popular during the pandemic. So, everyone owned one. I did too. And then I sold it because I was like, I don't do cardio.
You're like, this isn't my jam.
Like, I don't do HIIT. Like, this is not going to work for me. So, I think it has its place, but I think it's too often recommended as like a sales tactic and a marketing tactic, and it doesn't have the person's best interest at mind.
So what are your favorite forms of movement?
The simplest being walking. Honestly, walking is so underrated. Getting your steps in, walking in nature, super, super underrated.
Yes. Walking in nature. Yes. Because you're getting like so many benefits from that, like the nature component is so huge.
I have a funny story. So when I was trying to heal my thyroid and like I hired a functional nutrition person to like help me get off of meds, I was not in the right time frame, like the right place to get off of it at that time. So it didn't work. But she recommended like 2 20-minute walks a day in nature. And at the time I was like a full-time pharmacist. I was working 12-hour shifts. I'm like, not like, how am I going to do this? There's no way. I was like, I have a dog. I can do that when I walk my dog. And she's like, no, without the dog, because you need to be not distracted. And I'm like, there's no way. There's no way.
Right.
And really, she was just trying to get my cortisol down because it's the best way to just like reconnect and ground.
Yes.
And now I understand how important that is. And I just remember the pushback back in the day. And I was like, dang, I wish I just listened.
But I mean, that goes to show, I think so many women would agree with that, in that struggle to, even I see it myself, like I'll go walk in nature and I'll take a podcast to listen to. And I'm like, I need moments of literally just listening to the nature around me, like that is where so much healing comes in, like on all the levels that you just can't get that from diet. You can't get it from supplements. You can't, you need that, your system to just
decompress 100%.
Yep. Yeah. So besides walking, what are some of your other
Besides walking, I'm a huge fan of weight training. I love strength training and lifting weights. I think it has so many benefits, and, increased muscle mass is great for metabolism, is great for preventing osteoporosis, like all the things when we get older, keeping us young, keeping us able, like not having as much back problems or movement issues because we have that muscle to support us. So I'm huge for weight training.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it's been coming up on the podcast a lot recently. I just finally started doing weight training with a trainer in the past few months. Because I know over 40, which I'm 43, it's like, what I'm doing right now is helping to set up my bone health for the rest of my life,
Or post-menopause,
exactly. And so it's just, I tell women all the time, start younger if you can, but like even starting in your 40s, like it's gonna make such a huge difference, and it's going to impact your testosterone levels when they're starting to naturally go down. There's so many benefits from it. Plus like the strength, I think the mental strength that you get from it too.
You do, because you end up I think I started my journey with weight training, obviously wanting to look a certain way. And now I'm like, I just want to lift heavy things.
Yeah,
like,
I'm strong, Yeah. And how that can bleed into other parts of your life, right? Where you're like, okay, yeah, exactly. And so that's what I love about this sort of holistic approach. Yeah.
I was going to ask you what your favorite exercise was to recommend, but I'm very happy to hear you got into weight.
Yeah. I was like, those two, I think, are key. Like, I think walking in nature is absolutely amazing, and I used to be a dancer, so I still like to dance.
Oh yeah.
But, I definitely, the amount of cardio that I used to do just from dancing, it's just like my body can't handle that anymore. Like, no, it's like, I'll do it for fun and, I'll do some, but like hours of that, it's just not good.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
I have a question for you.
I was like, throwing it back on me.
So since you just started really incorporating strength training, and I know for women, the main pushback we get is like, I don't want to be bulky, right? I'm afraid to bulk up or look manly.
Yep.
What do you have? Like, what is your take on that?
Well, it's funny. I just talked about this actually with another guest recently on the podcast, but unless you take testosterone and completely blunt out your estrogen, we're never going to be able to bulk up like a man, right? Like it's just not physically possible when you have estrogen happening. Your testosterone naturally is never going to go as high as a man's. Like even if you have high testosterone, it's still never going to go as high as a man's.
So I wanted this so that when I share it to my listeners, I'll be like, listen, another person says this out loud with me.
Yeah, I know. And I brought that up recently on the podcast because I do see a lot of women that really freak out about that, and first of all, I think it's super sexy when women have like rockin', muscles and everything, but it is a different thing that your body's just not gonna go in that direction.
I was like, I try and get bulky and I can't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly. I was like, the estrogen and the progesterone too are keeping you from that, those levels. It's not gonna
right.
happen. But
Perfect.
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
absolutely. I love that. Okay. So tell us a little bit more about how it works. I know you talked about like I talk to everybody that comes to you to, sort of place them. So you have multiple coaches that work with you.
Yes, I have
Okay.
2 under me at the moment. The
Okay.
goal is to get more
Yeah.
as we grow. But I have 2 coaches under me who work with me who are awesome. Like
Mhm.
I always tell people, I'm like, listen, I trust them very heavily because
Yeah.
I'm a little type A, right? Like I like to have control or like know what's going on.
Yeah.
And if I can like give them like my babies to other
Yep.
people, like that you are in great hands.
Yeah.
And I found that they pick up where I leave off too. So I'm not a certified personal trainer. They are.
Mm-hmm.
They're also certified in other things that I'm not, like
Nice.
training with injuries or some of the other nutritional components and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And we do certifications as a team too to kind of like boost what we know.
Nice.
But if I do the intake process and then we onboard you and we take notes and we have a bunch of forms we have you fill out, it probably gets very annoying.
I know. I always apologize when I send out my
Sorry,
health history form. I'm like, but we got to know everything.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
So we do that, and then we will start everyone off with what we call like our 2-week primer, which is like sort of meal planning, but not, right?
Mhm.
It's just like suggested foods and eating patterns.
Mhm.
And then we'll go into macros. And then as we're in that same subset for everyone, so that's what the general program looks like. We'll do macros, we'll do your programming with exercising if you
Mhm.
want it. We have a lot of just nutrition only clients. We do weekly check-ins with every client. We do team weekly Zoom calls. And then as we dive deeper into the client, we will focus on like their specific needs. So for example, one person may need a specific gut protocol or dealing with like a ton of acid reflux. So like
Mhm.
we'll do something different with that client than we will say just someone who is reverse dieting and needs to eat more and whose digestion is great. So
Mhm.
it really just depends on the person
Mhm.
with kind of how we dive in. But most of the time, we just want to help bring awareness to like the food choices you're making. So I say this a lot, but most people will say like peanut butter is a great protein source, and it's not,
Right.
right? It's a great fat
Fat
source
source. Yep.
with protein in it. And
Yep.
so when you start tracking and logging, and I'll fight this till the day I die, right? Like
Mhm.
I don't believe tracking is disordered eating because I think
Mm.
you need to bring some awareness to foods and also
Yes.
how much you need to eat and break some of those maybe emotional eating patterns and things and
Mhm.
take away good and bad foods and take away these umbrellas
Right.
that you get with macros with flexible eating. And then we can move into more intuitive eating. Like that's the
Right.
goal, is
Yep.
to not track forever.
Mhm.
But maybe for a specific time, we need to bring some awareness. So
Yep.
we get a lot of aha moments when
100%.
we start doing all this with clients. And that's my favorite
People
part.
do not understand. I mean, I don't want to say don't understand. All of us do not like comprehend everything that we're intaking each day
No
until
way.
we write it down, right? Especially like if
Right.
you work in an office and people bring in food and you just have a little bit of
Mhm.
this or what have you, you're at a party. And so that awareness that comes with actual tracking is life-changing.
So I love it because we call it BLTs. So like bites, licks, and tastes, right?
I was like, I'm gonna take that. I like
Yeah.
that.
And you don't, I mean, I didn't come up with it, but
Yeah, okay.
I heard it, loved it, probably
I
did the
was
same
like,
thing.
I
So
will bring it in from wherever you
BLTs.
got it.
So again, yeah, you don't notice that. And then we have a client or like, say we have a client who's like, well, I just like nibble on things all day, or I'm doing a bunch of this that's really annoying to track,
Yeah.
like half of this. And I'm like, then we have to choose not to do
Right.
that. And we need to bring it into meals
Right.
or more satisfying things. So we're not, because if something becomes annoying to track, that probably means it's not in our best interest.
Absolutely. Your poor digestion's like, I need a break.
Yeah, just every 15 minutes. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long do you tend to work with people?
So I will say we have plan ranges from 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months, but I'm very like privileged to say that our mean average time that someone works with us
Mhm.
is probably closer to like 10 to 12 months. Like
Mhm.
we're passing a lot of 12-month anniversaries, which
Nice.
is super amazing.
Yeah.
And I love that because it's really unrealistic to reverse years of habits and things in 12 weeks. Even
Yes.
6 months, it's very
Yep.
difficult.
Yep.
We can get someone through their first reverse diet and their first maintenance period in 6 months, but then we'll need that additional 3 months to possibly do another cut. So you're looking at the long haul. And if your goal is to lose 50 pounds or plus, we may need 2 of those cycles.
Yeah.
Like we're
Yep.
not going to dive in if we're getting bad negative feedback. So I love that people are just investing more time because
Yeah.
they know it's what's needed. Plus, accountability rocks. I hire my own coaches because I want
100%.
someone to tell me what to do.
100%. Absolutely. And I mean, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I tell people a lot. I mean, it is hard because there's so much out there of 1 month, 3 months, but the reality is if you've been suffering with something for years,
Right.
often 10, 20, even 30 years, 3 months is not going to cut it.
No.
Like 6 months is usually not going to cut. It's really that year mark when you see a lot of the big changes kind of happen because you've really laid that foundation.
And I think you also need to take into account, like we're human,
Yep.
like life stuff is going to happen.
Yep.
COVID may knock you down for 2 weeks, vacation,
Yes.
travel, family, like setbacks are going to happen. So
Yes.
whatever you think your timeline is going to be, double it anyway. And if
Yeah.
you finish faster, awesome.
Yeah.
But it won't set you up for that disappointment.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Oh,
So
I love. Yeah.
we really try and like move people away from the scale. So
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Which is a huge thing in of itself, like to get people off of that.
yeah.
Well, this was such an amazing conversation. Oh my God. I was like,
An hour went by already.
I know. I was like, there's so many things I could talk about because I'm just like, yes, everything you're saying. Yes. So let people know how they can get in touch with you.
So the best way is honestly Instagram. We're always on social media. So my Instagram is at Dr. Dwyer, and then our team Instagram is at Team BDN Coaching. So no longer the Big Day Nutrition, at Team BDN. So you can go there, or our website is still, if you type in thebigdaynutrition.com, you'll still get it.
It'll go there. Perfect. That's what I like. Great. We'll put those in the notes so people can click directly. And yeah, thanks for all the work that you're doing. And I really love, I love actually meeting people that were pharmacists or doctors or what have you in allopathic medicine that have moved over, because you do have this like wide array of knowledge, right, that you're bringing in. And I think that's so important. And you understand levels and layers of what people are working with when they go to their doctors, and they tell you about it too, that, not everybody's going to have.
Yeah. And honestly, even getting the own pushback from my own doctors, like I've gone into my gynecologist and been like, I want my hormones run. And they're like, we don't do that.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
You don't do that? What do you mean? So
yeah. That is a tangent I could go on forever. Like, especially when their OBGYNs are like, oh, there's no point because they shift throughout the month. I'm like, there's reference ranges on there for
that shift.
Right.
Yeah.
So that there is actual science backing up where it should be. But anyways, I could go on and on about that.
Yeah. Again, another
exactly. I was like another hour, but yeah, anyways, go ahead.
No, it's just all about like bridging the gap and fixing the core issues. Because if we don't fix core issues, which could be trauma, mindset, undereating, hormone dysregulation, gut health, there's a bunch of them, right?
Yeah.
We're going to be stuck on band-aids and cycles of horrible fad diets, and nobody wants that.
Yep, absolutely. Love that message. Well, thank you for sharing all of your infinite wisdom with us today. It was so great.
This was awesome.
Yeah. All right, you guys, I will see you next time.